and my inspiration for this brief meditation actually comes from Gaia. Gaia is our ultimate teacher. And one of the things that Gaia produces that many of us love are pearls. A pearl is actually created when a foreign object makes its way inside an oyster. And this irritation is given a coating of fluid around it from the oyster. And there are layers and layers of fluid that get produced to deal with this irritation. Now, the more layers that get coated around, the bigger the pearl becomes, the more lustrous and luminous the pearl is. And so instead of an irritation, what's created is the most beautiful, precious, lustrous, shiny pearl. And with this teaching from Gaia, we can look at this as Spirit looks at you. If you're tuning in to this program, it means you're an old soul. And it means that you have had many lifetimes after lifetimes on the planet. And your Akash has built up layers and layers of wisdom, of experience, of knowledge. And what this produces is a divine human being who has a lustrous pearl within them that is glowing and seen by everyone around them. It's seen by your compassionate action. It's seen by your wisdom and knowledge as you respond to situations with love and kindness and compassion. And it's seen by your eagerness to be here and connect with family and hear the loving message from Kryon.
Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. Indeed, lustrous pearls you are. A metaphor of value, a metaphor of shining, of light. All of these things we celebrate. If you haven't heard this before, I come in these times with a message that celebrates the fact that you are here in a new energy. This entire month, we have given you messages of change. We started out by telling you that the changes that we speak of have been foretold. We've given you some information about what they have been, and from the sources, some of the sources you know, some you don't, we gave you. Just to emphasize that this is a worldwide consensus of spiritual leaders, shamanics, all of the things that you might expect that would celebrate that which is happening spiritually on the planet. Even the indigenous talk about the cycles, and the cycles now are wrapping up to either start again or to change dramatically. And here you are. Some have asked, did COVID have anything to do with this? Of course, dear ones, there are no accidents. And we have talked about that as well. It's a reset, perhaps, even what some have called a reboot. We've even talked about so many of those who left the planet during this time, because they are coming back quickly. Dear ones, everything that has happened that you consider unusual is part of this change. Some of the change is massive, and some is subtle, and some you won't believe. One today I give you, difficult to believe. The second week, I gave you another change. I talked about things that you might think are always present and just the way things are. We talked about how history repeats itself, and it does. We talked about a system of that, and we told you that the system has changed. We told you not to expect in the future what's happened in the past, even though there is science behind it, and there are those who say, well, it always returns to a certain level, including war. War begets war begets war, and that is changing and has changed. Here's another one. The subject today is controversial. It's controversial because certain things that you believe are absolute are only because they always have been. I've used an example of absoluteness in the teaching, in the channeling, many times in the past. One of my favorites is gravity. Gravity is absolute. Now, gravity is an energy. It's physics. We have even told you that gravity, of course, is variable, and it depends on mass. But for you, it's not variable. It's always the same. You grow up with it, you learn to work with it, therefore you never think about it. If I told you suddenly gravity is going to change, it would be laughable. And there would be those who say, oh, sure, there he's crying again, talking about something that's not even possible. But dear ones, this one is going to be very similar to that message. If you're a psychologist, a psychiatrist, if you are invested in helping people with that which you would call the mental state, the way of solving problems around them, and the things you would want to consult a psychologist for, you wouldn't be alone. There are so many things that people are trying to get a grip on, and their own issues and problems, and so many healers that are on these shows define those things and show ways of getting out of anxiety and fear and what to do with relationships and all of that. But if you studied psychology, if you're a psychiatrist, you know that there has to be a baseline from which you go in order to help people. And that baseline is, how do people interact with people in a normal way? And that baseline then helps you to understand the abnormal behavior. What causes it? What to do with it? How do you get back to that baseline? What if I told you the baseline is changing? Now that would pretty well void some of the training. At least it would change it. There are psychologists and psychologists already saying that the baseline is starting to move. What do I mean about the baseline? Let's just look at examples. Two men together. There starts to be one of them who is angry or perhaps dissatisfied, disappointed. And so you have something where then energy starts to heat up with the one who is angry, and he starts raising his voice to the other one, maybe even calls him a name. So what does the other one do? 99% of the time, raise the voice, continue, call a name back, for instance. And then they part. And it takes a lot to get back together after that, especially if they were friends. Less time if they were family, because they do that anyway. What is that called? That baseline is called human nature. Now, there are many facets of human nature, but it describes how a human acts in any situation that is considered to be an average act or normal or expected behavior. That's the baseline. That's the study. And book after book after book has been written on the baseline. What is human nature? how do you then work with human nature? Is human nature greed? Is human nature expectations of certain kinds of things? There are many who would say, absolutely yes. Power corrupts human nature, you would say, and it's absolute. There are so many phrases that are based in what you would call human nature. Some have even said, well, there's going to be another war. And you say, well, why? It says, why should there be another war? What makes that happen? We've already discussed the cycles of this in history, but this is something else. Somebody will say, it always goes there, and you'll say, why? You say, well, it's human nature. That's just what humans do. And that then becomes the source and the baseline for those who wish to help humans through this. What if I told you human nature is changing? Is it possible that that baseline could move? And there would be those who say, Krian is wrong. Human is a human is a human. And a human has been a human for 100 years, 1,000 years, and they've acted a certain way. And time after time after time, this is what happens, this is what happens. Book after book after book is written. This is the way of it. It's called being a human being. And they would then say, it cannot change. You cannot say that human nature is moving. Oh, yes, I will. Two men. One starts heating up the argument. One starts being disappointed, raises his voice to the other, and the other does not react. In fact, the other does not have buttons pressed that say, I better be angry. I better get heated up. My face better get red. I better have my heart start pumping a little more. The other one just sits and sees it. And the whole persona of the other man is this: I'm sorry, my friend is having a bad day. In other words, there's no reaction. Tell me, is that human nature? And you'll say, no, well, that's mastery. That's what we expect of the masters who don't get angry and don't do this, or we're told. What if it was the beginning of a new human nature? You might call that an evolvement in human interaction. An evolvement in human interaction. Come to expect this, and you're starting to see it. Are you ready? In young people. They're starting actually to listen instead of get mad. Now, I say young people, I don't mean the 4-year-old. I don't even mean the 10-year-old. I mean the 20-something, and perhaps even the 30-something, who is starting to solve these kinds of problems in a far different way than you did or your parents did. If you haven't noticed, it's there. There are so many things I could tell you about how that may affect everything around you. Corporations compete with each other, and they do it sometimes in negative ways. We've told you there'll come a time when there is a consciousness of competition which is benevolent. And there will be those who will compete for sales in a way where they actually get together and let everyone see what they have, and free choice is there instead of hammering the other product and saying, well, my competitor, well, they're not very good. We're better, and here's why. You say, well, that's human nature. What if it were not? What if it was, my competitor is here. They make the same product as I do. Come on, competitor, let's talk to the camera. And they both talk and they say, here's what I have. And the other one says, here's what I have. And they shake hands and say, thanks, folks, for listening. Now make a choice. And you'll say, Krian, you're crazy. They don't really do that. No, but they will. Before the recent election, I gave a situation that seemed untenable to anyone and laughable. I told you about, in the future, a debate with presidential candidates, where in order for them to debate, the first thing they had to do is stand up and congratulate the other one and tell how good they were and what they'd done. And it was a prerequisite. In other words, they had to find good things about their opponent. And there always have been. Anyone running for high office has had good things that they have done, or their ideas of what they want to do to help the country are there. You never hear about them. You only hear about their past, or what they did wrong, or what they did when they were 18. You know what I'm speaking of. What if there comes a time where the public will be looking for who is the most genuine to congratulate the other one, to look for a personality that can work with people, work with those in government, to be able to solve problems even on both sides of the aisle. And it would be a maturity that you had never seen before, and it might be even in your government. And you'd say, impossible. You might even see it start in other governments before your own. Dear ones, these are the things to look forward to, and the answer to why and how is a change in human nature. It's evolving. There'll come a day when you'll see it, and it'll be so different than what you expected. You'll say, Kryon said this was coming, and here it is. And at that point in time, you might just breathe and drop into your heart and say, thank you, Spirit, for an evolving humanity, slowly, not fast enough perhaps, but better than it was, and one perhaps that will never go to war again. That's why I'm here, to shed light on some things you don't expect and to tell you the changes are afoot. I'm Kryon, in love with humanity. And so it is.